Episode 1. They say you must die before you're forgiven. I was warned not to go. Everyone in Vildara knew the rumor. If you confess at the Church of St. Laria, your soul never comes back whole, especially if you're still breathing. But grief makes fools of even the wise, and I was desperate. My brother, Caleb, died whispering one word, Laria. It was the only thing his blood-choked mouth managed before he flatlined. A week later, I found his journal under a loose floorboard. No prayer, no goodbye, just this: they don't forgive the living, only the dead can speak the truth. So I went, alone. Midnight, the church stood like a rotting tooth in the hills, blackened by time and something far older than fire. The iron gates were unlocked. No candles, no priests, no sound, except the wind hissing through broken stained glass. And yet, the confession booth was lit from within. I stepped in, heart like thinner. The wood creaked under me, old and bitter. I slid the screen open and frowned. There was someone on the other side, but it wasn't a priest. It was a corpse, mouth stitched shut, eyes open, hands folded like prayer. And yet, I heard a voice. Only the dead speak truth here. I should have run, but something kept me there, some weight in my chest that I carried since Caleb's death, a sin I thought I'd buried. So I confessed. Every word cracked out of me like splinters from my ribs. The accident, the lie, the night I left him alone, and the corpse listened. And just as I whispered, "Forgive me," the body moved. Its mouth stitched and sealed began to weep blood, and the voice returned, louder this time. "Not human. Now you belong to us. Come back when you're truly ready." The lights went out. I stumbled from the booth, choking on air that suddenly smelled of soil and decay. But I wasn't alone. The pews were full of corpses, silent, watching. One by one, their heads turned to me, and I finally understood what Caleb meant. You can't lie to the Church of St. Laria, not unless you've already died. And I hadn't. Episode 2. The dead remember who lied. They follow me home, not in the way shadows follow your feet under moonlight. No, I mean truly followed. Something from the church came back with me. I felt it each time I blinked. In the mirror, in the static hum of my bedroom lamp, in the silence that somehow whispered my name. I locked every door that night, burned the clothes I wore, scrubbed my skin until it peeled, but sin doesn't wash off. I tried to forget. God knows I tried, but 3 nights later, Caleb's voice came through the walls. "You lied in the booth, Micah." The voice was wrong, hollow, dragged through gravel, but it was him. And when I turned on the light, the air turned cold and the crucifix above my bed had flipped upside down. I ran back to the church. This time, the gate was closed, barred with bones, but it opened for me. Inside, everything had changed. The pews were empty now. The altar burned with blue fire, and where the confession booth had stood was now a grave. A single headstone, fresh soil. My name, Micah Thorne, died confessing a lie. I dropped to my knees. I told the truth. I screamed. I told everything. The ground cracked. A pale hand erupted from the soil, bloated and twitching. Then another, and then a face, my own. Not a mirror, not a dream. It was me, dead, eyes bloodshot, lips moving without sound. And in that moment, the pews began to fill again, but this time, not with strangers. I saw Caleb first, then my mother, then men and women I'd never met but somehow knew. All of them, versions of me. Micah after choices I never made. Some younger, some older, some barely recognizable. All dead, all whispering the same thing. You didn't confess at all. One lie stains every truth. I tried to run, but the doors vanished. The grave widened. The dead knee smiled, then spoke. You confessed what made you cry, not what made you laugh while it died. Then it lunged for me. I woke up screaming. In my room, alive, but on my desk was the headstone, lettered, my name, and underneath it, carved with something sharp. "You're not forgiven yet." Episode 3. The living must die twice. I didn't sleep after that. Would you? When your grave appears in your room and your own corpse calls you a liar. The worst part wasn't the vision. It wasn't the whispers. It was the fact that they were right. I did lie. I confessed the sorrow, the regret, the "I didn't mean to," but I never spoke of the secret that still rotted in me like maggots in a coffin. because the truth wasn't just that I left Caleb alone. It was that I wanted to. I begged God to take him instead of me. I smiled when he fell asleep for the last time because for one night, I didn't have to carry him. I thought if I never said that out loud, he would die with me. But the Church of Saint Lauria doesn't let sin stay buried. So I made a decision. I had to go back. But this time, I wouldn't go as the living. I found the woman in the forest. They call her the widow of Red Ash. People say she once served as a midwife and a mortician. Sometimes both at once. Now she only helps those who want to cross without dying. I told her what I needed. She looked at me with one blind eye and one burning like candlelight. You want to confess among the dead as one of them. I nodded. She smiled, and it chilled me more than any grave. Then you must die, but only for a while. She mixed herbs with ash, whispered Latin over a basin, and asked for a lock of my hair. Then she slit my finger and let the blood drip into the water. Drink, but don't sleep too long. If they forget you're alive, you stay with them forever. The moment I drank it, the world collapsed. No breath, no pulse, only silence, deeper than silence. And then, I opened my eyes. I was in the church again, but this time, it wasn't a ruin, it was full. Candles lit every wall. The choir was singing the psalm with no words, only grief. And at the altar stood Caleb, not the boy I left. He was grown, clean, clothed in priest's robes made of thorns and smoke. He turned to me, eyes filled with something between mercy and judgment. Now you can speak where the living cannot. He pointed to the confession booth. But choose your words wisely. Micah, the second death is permanent. I stepped forward, my heart dead but my guilt louder than ever, because I knew what I had to say next, and I didn't know if it would save me or damn me completely. Episode 4, The Confession You Can Return From. The confession booth was waiting for me like a coffin with its lid cracked open. I stepped inside. My dead heart didn't beat, but I could feel it like something unseen watching me from behind my own ribs. The velvet curtain sealed itself shut behind me. Then the screen slid open, but there was no corpse this time. Only darkness, a perfect, listening void. Speak, the voice said. It didn't come from a mouth. It came from the air, from my thoughts, from the wood itself. I opened my mouth and for a moment, nothing came out. Then I said it, not the version I rehearsed, not the soft, sanitized pain I'd whispered before. This was the true thing. I was glad when he died. The words dropped like iron. The silence that followed was hungry. I went on. I was tired of Caleb, tired of carrying his illness, of watching him waste away. I prayed for God to take him instead of me. And when it happened, I felt free. There, I said it. I expected thunder, fire, punishment, but all I heard was the sound of breathing. Deep, ragged, right behind me. I turned. The booth was still empty, but the wood was bleeding. Crimson drops formed on the ceiling, ran down the walls, soaked the velvet curtain behind me. Then the voice returned lower now, not angry, amused. You think this was your worst sin? The floor split beneath me. I fell, not fast, not like gravity. It was slower, intentional as if unseen hands were pulling me downward, deeper into something colder than death. And then, I landed, a stone chapel, below that church. Candles lit by no fire, walls carved with names I didn't recognize except one. Caleb Thorne forgiven. I turned around. He was standing there, not as a ghost, not as a priest, but as my judge. It wasn't your hatred that brought you here, he said. It was your silence, your pride. You believed your sin deserved secrecy, not redemption. He stepped forward. Now the church must decide. The pews behind him filled again, but not with the dead, with every version of me who never confessed, who carried guilt like armor, who chose silence and rotted inside it. And one by one, they pointed at me, their mouths opened, and in one voice, they spoke. He does not belong among the dead. Episode 5, Exile from the Afterlife. He does not belong among the dead. The words echoed like a verdict heavy, final, cruel, and then they vanished. Not the voices, the versions of me. One by one, they dissolved into ash faces imploding into shadows, mouths stretching wide as if screaming in reverse, until the chapel stood empty again. Only Caleb remained. He stepped closer, the candlelight flickering against his too pale face. "Do you know why they rejected you, Micah?" I couldn't speak. My throat was dry, even in death, because you confessed for yourself, not for the ones you harmed. My knees gave out. I dropped before him, chest hollow, breathless even in this limbo. But I told the truth finally. I whispered. He knelt beside me. "You told it so you could feel clean, not so I could rest." His hand touched my shoulder, cold, then burning, like holy fire that didn't cleanse, but branded. I screamed. The pain wasn't physical, it was memory. It was every moment. I rewrote in my mind to look like mercy when it was selfishness. Every time, I wore grief like a costume. And then Caleb stood. "You are not ready for forgiveness. Not from us. Not from him." It pointed toward a stone archway that had not been there before. At first, I thought it was a passage. Then I realized it was a doorway back to the living. "Go," he said, "and carry your guilt properly this time. You will not die again until you are the one being confessed." The next moment, I woke, choking, on air, on light, on life. I was back in my apartment, but it wasn't the same. The window was cracked from the inside. The crucifix above my bed had turned to glass, and carved into the wall words I had never written. "The church remembers." I tried to stand, but my legs buckled. Something was wrong, not just inside me, around me, because I wasn't alone in the room. The floor creaked behind me, and then a whisper, "Bless me, Micah, for I have sinned." I turned around. No one there, but a chair was pulled out, facing me, like a booth, like a warning, because now, the confessions weren't over. They were coming to me. Episode 6, The Living began to confess. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to be a confessor, but something crossed over with me, something that refused to stay buried in the cursed church. I was no longer just a man. I had become a door of passage between guilt and judgment, and the dead weren't the only ones knocking anymore. It began with a woman upstairs, Mrs. Tolland, quiet, wrinkled like an old hymn book. She hadn't left her apartment in years. She knocked on my door just after midnight, shaking, eyes hollow, like she hadn't slept in weeks. I need to talk to someone," she whispered. "To confess?" I frowned. "See, why me?" She looked behind her shoulder, trembling, "Because something's in my mirror, and it said your name." I let her in. I don't know why. Maybe I already knew this wasn't about me anymore. She sat in the same chair, the one that had been pulled out on its own days ago. Her hands shook as she folded them in her lap, eyes locked on the floor like it might open up and swallow her. "I poisoned my husband," she said. No prelude, no emotion. Everyone thought it was cancer, but it wasn't. I crushed the pills. I smiled while I did it. I sang while it choked. Silence. Then the lights dimmed, not like a flicker, like something was drinking the electricity. And behind her, just for a moment, he saw a shadow. Long, thin, with a face that looked melted by guilt. "Do you feel sorry?" I asked. She looked at me, eyes filling with something like regret. I thought I did, but now I think I was only afraid of being caught. I didn't know what to say, but the house did. The walls groaned, the floor shook, and in the corner of the room an identical chair appeared, empty, but waiting. She turned toward it, her lips trembling. Is that from me?" Before I could answer, her body began to twist, not violently, not screaming, just fading, like she was being undone thread by thread. And her last words before she vanished, "It's not forgiveness I need, it's a place to burn." And then she was gone. No body, no blood, just the scent of old roses, and ashes in the shape of a rosary on the floor. Now, they come every night. The broken, the guilty, the liars, who smile through communion and cry into pills. And I sit across from them, not priest, not judge, just the last door before the grave. Because the Church of St. Lauria isn't a building anymore. It's me. Episode 7, A Priest Who Never Died Wants to Confess. It was 3:33 a.m. when the knocking came again. 3 knocks, each one louder than the last. Not on the door, on the walls. I didn't answer immediately. I'd learned it better. Some nights, the ones who came were meant to speak, they were meant to haunt. But this time, something felt different. When I opened the door, he was already sitting, color black, cross silver, skin so pale it looked powdered with centuries of dust. A priest, but he didn't blink, didn't move, just folded his hands and said in a voice like cracked stone, "I never died, and I should have." He looked at me with eyes that had once believed in mercy but were now hollowed out by secrets too large to bury. "I served the church, not Saint Laria, the Vatican." He spat the word like it tasted foul. "They sent me to cleanse the unclean. I heard confessions from murderers, molesters, monsters in robes, and I absolved them, not because they repented, but because I was ordered to." He leaned forward. His breath was cold and smelled of old wine and rot. "They made me bury their sins. Under churches, in orphans, in fire." He reached into his coat and pulled out a crucifix. Not gold, not wood, bone, human bone, carved and polished smooth. I broke the rules of God so I could obey the rules of men. The light in the room bent. Shadows slithered across the walls like serpents. Then he whispered, "But I never confessed." And suddenly I understood. He wasn't here to be forgiven. He was here to offer his rod to someone else so he could finally die. "Will you hear me?" he asked. I should have said no, but the church was in me now, and the church never turns away the truth no matter how foul it stinks. So I nodded. "Speak." What followed wasn't a confession. It was a crucifixion. He told me of a convent burned while nuns begged for mercy, of a boy buried alive beneath an altar, of the demon he let in, thinking it was the Holy Spirit, and all the while, his body began to split, not with blood, with light, searing, holy light that didn't comfort judged. It peeled the lies from him like dead skin, until what remained wasn't human. He looked at me one last time. "You have to carry me now." And it crumbled, bone, smoke, ash. Only the cross remained, still warm, still whispering. I picked it up, and in that moment, I heard every confession he'd ever taken, a choir of sins echoing through my mind, like a funeral mass with no end. Now I sleep with screams in my head, and the church is louder than ever. Episode 8, The Child Who Confessed, a sin that never happened. That night, I heard laughter, not the joyous kind, not even cruel. It was wrong to light, too hollow, too rehearsed, like someone trying to remember how humans laugh. I opened the door, expecting another lost soul, but it wasn't a soul. It was a child, barefoot, mud-stained, hair tangled like old roots. I asked the dark for someone so small. She didn't speak at first. She walked straight to the chair, sat her day down like she'd been here before. Her feet didn't even touch the ground. Are you here to confess something?" I asked. She nodded, then smiled, and when she smiled, I felt the room get colder. "I killed my sister," she whispered. Silence. I swallowed. "How old was your sister?" "Still in mommy's tummy." I frowned. "See, I pushed her," the girl said, voice sweet as syrup. "I told mommy to play in the river. Then I let go of her hand. She giggled. Now the baby sleeps forever." The candle beside us extinguished itself. No wind, just gone. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Why are you telling me this?" The child tilted her head. "Because you're the only one who listens to the wrong ones." She hopped off the chair and skipped toward the door but paused at the threshold, then said something I'll never forget. "But it's not true. I didn't really do it." I stared at her. "What?" "I just dreamed I did. Every night. Every time I sleep. I feel her tiny bones in my hand. I hear her scream inside mommy." Her eyes met mine. For the first time, the sweetness vanished. "So, if I keep dreaming it, doesn't that mean I did it? Even if it never happened?" She waited for me to answer. But what could I say? In this house, this church dreams had power. Guilt manifested, and if the dead had to confess what they buried, what about the living who carry phantoms? She smiled again, wider this time, and said, "Don't worry, when I really do it, I'll come back." Then she vanished. Not walked, vanished. No trace. Only a small stuffed rabbit left behind, burned at the edges, still bleeding from the eyes. And beneath it, a note written in a child's crayon. Confession 001, Imagine Sins Count. 2. Episode 9, The Man Who Tried to Confess God's Sin. It was raining ash the night he arrived. Not snow, not dust, ash, falling in slow spirals outside my window. Though no fire had touched the sky. He didn't knock, He opened the door himself, something no one had done before. Dull, barefoot, eyes veiled with silk, skin wrapped in bandages like parchment, stained with symbols I didn't recognize. He smelled of old incense and dry blood, and he was humming, "Forgive me, Father," he said, sitting in the confessor's chair, "for he has sinned." I didn't answer. I couldn't. His presence wasn't human. He was something in between a wound that had never healed, a sermon never preached, his Saturday with the weight of ancient sorrow, like he had been carrying a secret since creation. "I've walked from altar to altar," he said, "and all I found are men kneeling to silence." He removed his blindfold. There were no eyes, just a mirror, polished into the flesh of his face. And when I looked into it, I saw the first lie ever told, not by man, by God. He made us to worship, but refused to tell us what for. The man said softly. He built light, then invented darkness to hide inside. His voice cracked, not with emotion, but with age, with knowing. I watched him create hunger, then curse those who steal bread. I watched him plant love in a heart he never let beat. And I watched him let the innocent drown to save one chosen coward. The ash outside thickened. My walls trembled, candles melted backward, reforming like time was reversing. And still, he went on, "I am not asking you to forgive him," he said, "because he would never kneel. I only ask this." He reached into his robe and pulled out a scroll sealed with thorns. It bled when he touched it. "Keep his confession until the sky forgets how to lie." He stood, faceless, faithless, but not hollow. "The church in you was made for man, but someday it must judge its maker." He turned toward the door, paused, then whispered, "He knows you're listening now." Then he walked into the rain of ash. Gone. I placed the scroll in the wall behind the mirror, but I haven't opened it. Not yet. Because tonight, I swear I heard God breathing behind my door, and he sounded afraid. Episode 10, The Saint Who Refused to be Canonized. It started with bells, not church bells, bone bells. They ran from nowhere, from inside my walls, hollow and wet, like femurs strung together and swung through centuries of guilt. Then came the knocking, 3 taps, 1 heartbeat apart, no door, just hair. And when I opened my eyes, she was already sitting in the chair. Her robes were threadbare, stitched from old veils and pilgrim shrouds. Her hands were scarred from violence, but from prayer, the kind that tears the flesh when God won't answer. And her face half rotten, half radiant, a saint, one who should have been exalted, one who was running. "They tried to canonize me," she said, her voice fraying like parchment left in rain. But I knew the truth. I knew what saint it cost. She didn't look at me as she spoke. "It's not a reward. It's a leash." I leaned forward. "Who are you?" She laughed, but it cracked. "No name. Just another woman who bled for men who didn't deserve it." Her eyes found mine. They wanted a symbol, a miracle, a pretty corpse to parade in gold. But my miracles were mistakes, accidents of agony. I didn't heal the sick. I took their sickness into myself. And when I begged God to take it away, he answered with silence. The candle beside her burned blue. So I did the only holy thing left. I ran. The room began to shift. The walls bled scripture. The ceiling wept wax. Outside, the ash turned to feathers falling from a sky that forgot how to hold angels. "And now?" I asked. She smiled like a crucifix smiling back. "Now I come to confess the sin of not wanting to be worshipped." She reached into her chest in tow, not honor, and pulled out a relic, a heart, still warm, wrapped in thorns. They carved me into stained glass, mica, but glass always breaks. "So take this me truth, not for glory, for ruin." She stood, dripping wax and memory. "If you keep hearing confessions, you'll become what they try to make me, an icon, a prison, a lie." Then she kissed my forehead and disintegrated into ash. No flames, no smoke, just a whisper. "Don't let them turn your pain into a gospel." I keep her heart beneath the floorboards. It still beats once a night, always at 3:33, always when I start to believe that silence is peace. Episode 11, The Voice That Confessed Through Fire. It began with smoke, not curling from the stove, not drifting through the cracks rising from the floorboards, as if my apartment had become the mouth of something ancient and starving. Then the fire came, but not on the walls, not on the ceiling. In my mouth, it ignited behind my teeth. licking my throat with tons of heat that didn't burn flesh but memory. I tried to scream, couldn't. Then the voice came through me, not mine. Something was using me, speaking through me, and I was the confessor, but now I was the confessional. Forgive me, for I was the match. I heard the words, but didn't say them. They crawled from my lungs, carved through my ribs. They said the town deserved punishment, that the soil had forgotten how to kneel. So I brought fire. I called it holy, and I watched them burn inside the church they built for forgiveness. Men, women, children, they sang while they died. I thought it was prayer. Later, I realized it was screaming. My hands trembled, my lips cracked. The flames didn't touch the room, only me, and I understood. This wasn't a ghost. This was a memory-made flame, a soul too scorched to manifest any other way. They made me a saint. The voice hissed, after the smoke cleared, called me the purifier of vessels. But every night, I dream of hands clawing through pews. And no, I didn't cleanse. I consumed. My skin blistered. The floor beneath me groaned like it was sinking into hell. Then one final sentence is spoken, not in pain, but in trembling hope. Tell the fire it was not a sacrifice. Tell the flames they were never holy. And just like that, the fire vanished. My breath returned. My skin cooled. My voice was my own again. But in the center of the room where no one had stood was a blackened footprint. Charred, cracked, still smoking, and etched into the floor beside it. Burned so deep it bled light. Confession received. Redemption pending. Now I know. Some sins don't come back as ghosts. They come back as blazes. They demand to be spoken through flesh. And I fear next time, the fire won't leave. It'll stay in me. Episode 12, The Confession That Can Only Be Heard by the Dying. There's a sound that only the dying hear. It's not music, not wind, not prayer. It's a whisper, curling under your heartbeat like smoke beneath a locked door. And last night, I heard it, because last night, I died. It wasn't dramatic. No knife, no car crash, no screaming, just silence. Heavy, sacred, like the world took a breath and forgot to let it out. I fell to the floor, no pain, just weightlessness, like the world dropped me. And in that moment, I saw the booth again, but not the one in my room. The original, the one in the church where this all began, where I first met Caleb's corpse, where I first spoke words that peeled my soul open like fruit. But now, it was different. There were no candles, no voices, no pews, just one door, black, breathing. I walked through. Inside was me, not a mirror, not a version. Me. He was sitting, pale, still, and dying. You're the part of me that never left. I whispered, the part that stayed inside the booth. He nodded. You became the church, Micah, but you never finished your own confession. Then he stood and spoke the words I had buried so deep, they no longer had language. I wanted him gone, not just Caleb, all of them, everyone who made me feel like a priest when I never asked to be holy. The air thickened, the walls closed in. I resented every broken soul that needed me, because every time they confessed, I felt more ruined. The other me looked at me with tears that didn't fall but burned. Forgive me for building an altar out of my pain. And then it crumbled. Ash. Again. Always ash. But something was left behind. A letter. Old. Folded in a child's handwriting. I opened it. Only one sentence. You were allowed to want peace. I woke up gasping. Alive. But lighter. Not clean. Not whole. But no longer rotting inside. That chair was still there. The booth still waits. The voices still come. But now, I'm ready to listen without carrying every shard inside me. Because the church doesn't belong to the dead anymore. It belongs to the broken who survived. Episode 13, The Confessor Must Confess. This will be the last time I sit in the chair. Not because the voices had stopped. Not because the ghosts have moved on. But because I finally know who I've been hearing all along. It wasn't just the dead. It wasn't just guilt or demons. It was me, echoed, distorted, begging to be heard. It began again at 3:33 a.m., the hour of unmaking. But this time, no one knocked. Instead, the chair across from mine moved on its own, turned toward me, inviting me to switch places. The booth had reversed. The confessor had become the one in need. I sat her slowly, as if the wood might reject me now. And then the room changed. The walls vanished. The ceiling lifted into a void of stars that looked down like witnesses. The floor pulsed beneath me like a heartbeat older than creation. And in front of me, a mirror, but not of my body, of my soul, burnt at the edges, stitched where words had once been cut, glowing faintly with the sins I swallowed so others could speak. And then the voice came, not a whisper, not even from outside, from inside me. You've heard every kind of confession but your own. Now speak. So I did. No lies, no poetry, no performance, just truth. I liked being needed. I hated being abandoned. I carried other people's sins, so I wouldn't have to look at my own. I thought if I helped enough broken people, maybe I'd stop feeling like one. But I was always hollow, not holy, not chosen, just hollow. The mirror cracked. Light spilled out, but not burning. Soft, like something had waited a long time to be let out. And then, a final voice, not angry, not divine, just familiar. Micah, you're not a priest. You're not a prophet. You're not a savior. You're just someone who listened when no one else would. The booth dissolved, and I was back in my room, alive. The chair across from me was gone, but the silence it left behind didn't feel empty. It felt clean. I don't know if the church is truly closed now. I don't know if the dead have finished speaking, but I do know this. For the first time in my life, I am not afraid of the quiet, because I finally made my confession, and something heard it. Final words scratched into the wall before I left the apartment forever. Even the listener deserves peace.